World War I brought with it much advancement in technology. This great war would change the way war was fought forever. Through its advancements in aviation, naval forces, ground warfare, and the home front, World War I would render old tactics and technology obsolete and force nations to innovate and develop new fighting machines or be left behind. Ground warfare, without a doubt, experienced the most advancement. The implementation of trenches revolutionized the way armies fought. Trenches allowed soldiers to stay under cover for long periods of time. The trench brought an end to the all-out frontal charges and strength of numbers of past wars. Trenches allowed small armies to defeat large ones and made every inch of earth gained a long and bloody battle. Armies' gains were no longer measured in miles, but in inches and feet of hard-fought, blood-stained ground. The machine gun also contributed to the death of the frontal assault. The first machine gun developed was the Maxim gun. Developed by the British, it was capable of firing 400 to 600 rounds per minute. With the firepower of over 100 rifles, the Maxim gun stopped dead advancing armies and sent the enemy cowering behind cover. These guns effectively laid down a wall of lead, rendering the already ineffective charge completely obsolete. Maxim guns were used by British, German, and Russian forces, while the United States preferred the Browning machine gun, which did not rely on gas power like the Maxim gun. A testament to the effectiveness of the machine gunners were the most hated troops among infantry, and when captured, were much more likely to be killed. Needing a way to effectively counter the entrenched machine guns, engineers began looking to heavy armored vehicles. Thus, the tank was born. Tanks traveled on caterpillar treads or long steel belts. These tracks made the tanks able to cover many different terrains. The introduction of the internal combustion engine made tanks even more effective. The British Mark I tank was first used in the Battle of the Somme and was able to effectively protect troops from machine gun fire, but could not cross the German trenches. This eventually led to the development of the American Mark VIII, or the Liberty. This tank was substantially longer, allowing it to cross most trenches. It was also mounted with naval 6-pound guns and Browning machine guns. The heavy armor of the tank allowed it to travel unscathed by machine gun fire. Its mounted machine guns and heavy naval guns also made it an offensive force to be reckoned with. With the rise of the tanks came a need for weapons that could destroy these moving fortresses. This is where artillery came in. Artillery began with the development of howitzers, short-barreled guns capable of firing large shells over long distances. Mortars became the portable version of artillery. Used by ground infantry, mortars allowed troops to take out enemy entrenchments from long distances. However, longer range and more powerful guns were needed. Thus the development of the heavy howitzers, such as the Big Bertha. These guns, often moved by trains because they were so heavy, were able to fire shells upwards of 900 kilograms over 18 kilometers. Artillery provided the answer to tanks. These massive guns could destroy tanks from miles away. Tanks often became death traps as they were the first things to be targeted by artillery. One of the most known weapons of World War I was gas. Gas was first used by the French when they fired tear gas grenades into German lines. The Germans later began using chlorine gas against the Allied forces. Chlorine gas destroys the respiratory system of the victim, killing them by suffocation. Phosgene gas was used later in the war as a more deadly alternative. Phosgene required much smaller amounts to kill, and would kill a soldier in less than 48 hours. However, none compared to the deadly mustard gas. This gas was capable of killing in less than 12 hours, It also only required very small amounts to be lethal. Advances in aviation took war to the skies for the first time in history. Fixed-wing aircraft sent humans skyward with their new weapons. Aircraft was originally used as reconnaissance, but this quickly changed with the interrupter mechanism. This machine allowed a machine gun to be mounted in the front of the aircraft and fire between the propellers of the plane. The first fighters began to emerge. Used to destroy enemy aircraft, they were the start of air-to-air combat. Zeppelins, large hot air balloons, were also used as reconnaissance and eventually were even used as strategic bombers. As aircraft improved, they were able to carry bombs along with them and drop them on their enemy targets. Airplanes allowed armies to see exactly what the enemy was doing far before they ever saw them on the ground. Fighters allowed these forces to destroy recon planes, and with the advancement of these aircraft, bombers enabled the destruction of targets that ground forces were nowhere near. Strategic bombing even extended the battlefield into population hubs and cities, bringing the home front into the battlefield. With advances in the air also came advances in the sea. Previously, navies used wooden ships and a few lumbering ironclads. However, World War I introduced the first battleships mounted with massive artillery guns and made almost entirely of steel. Powered by its four steam engines, the dreadnought became the most powerful force on the seas. These massive ships were the most heavily armed ships in history. They were mounted with 10 12-inch guns, 24 3-inch guns, and 5 torpedo tubes. They were covered with 28-centimeter thick plating and could travel at upwards of 21 knots. These ships were forces to be reckoned with, and even started an arms race between Britain and Germany. Britain managed to develop the super dreadnought, which in addition to all the same features of the dreadnought, had an additional 8 15-inch guns, packing even more of a punch. These monsters were capable of carrying troops, blasting through enemy ships, and even bombarding enemy positions on the shores. They allowed artillery to be moved quickly and efficiently, and made firepower extremely mobile. The development of the submarine quickly followed, as the need to take out this massive dreadnought emerged. Germany proved to be the most advanced in this new underwater warfare. The German U-boat was the first fighting submarine developed. It was equipped with 6 torpedo tubes as well as mine-laying equipment. Torpedoes quickly became surface ships' worst nightmare, and mines destroyed many other submarines. The U-boats managed to sink over 192 ships in war, killing over 5,400 people. World War I also saw a very large involvement from the United States home front. The draft of World War I was aided by the passage of the Selective Service Act of 1917. This act made it much harder to get out of the draft, awarding exemptions based on only a few reasons such as medical and dependency. The draft was met with almost none of the resistance characteristic of the draft during the Civil War. The unions during World War I also helped to contribute to the general support of the war. The American Federation of Labor strongly supported the war effort and urged their male members to enlist in the armed forces. The AFL also minimized strikes during the war and encouraged and supported the production of war goods. Propaganda also helped to strengthen support. Much of this propaganda was encouraging people to buy Liberty bonds to support the war effort. Some propaganda even tried to pit various ethnic groups against one another in buying bonds. One campaign urged the Polish-American population in Chicago to outpurchase the German-American population. With all of the advancement in technology of World War I came the need for new tactics and strategies. Lining up and firing volleys at the enemy would no longer suffice, as new weapons like the machine gun mowed down hundreds of soldiers. One of the tactics implemented to combat entrenched positions was the tank charge. This tactic had a line of tanks move forward with soldiers directly behind them. This tactic shielded infantry from machine gun fire and allowed the foot soldiers to get close enough to the trenches to lob grenades inside and destroy the entrenched machine gun emplacements. Another tactic used in World War I was the creeping barrage. The creeping barrage required precise timing and synchronizations between artillery and infantry. The artillery would begin shelling the area just ahead of the advancing infantry. It would then move forward at a determined rate, allowing the troops to follow closely behind it, attacking enemy positions right after they were shelled. As technology progressed and soldiers took to the skies and the seas, tactics developed involving each of these forces in conjunction. Aircraft would come to replace long-range artillery as strategic bombing became more and more effective. Every type of weapon began to be used together in order to destroy the enemy. World War I, the first war involving the entire world, revolutionized technology and the way war was fought. For the first time in history, the battlefield expanded into the home front. Soldiers soared through the air. Massive dreadnoughts ruled the seas, stalked quietly by German U-boats, and artillery guns demolished targets miles away. Tactics evolved from marching in straight lines to coordination of multiple different types of forces in one assault. World War I catapulted countries forward in attempts to build the most destructive war machines and develop the most ingenious tactics. This war introduced new concepts and strategies that would be used to this very day. World War I revolutionized the way war was fought and introduced some of the most powerful fighting forces known to man.